Michael Vick, the former Atlanta Falcons quarterback, got hit hard after his involvement in an illegal dogfighting ring. From 2001 to 2007, he and his associates ran Bad News Kennels in Virginia. They bred and trained pit bulls to fight and gambled on the results. In April 2007, police searched Vick's property and found 54 pit bulls, many in terrible shape. By July 17th, Vick was indicted on federal charges for running a dogfighting operation across state lines. In August, he pled guilty and admitted he helped fund it all. On August 24th, the NFL suspended him without pay. That suspension lasted 2 years while he served time in federal prison. After 19 months, Vick was released to home confinement in May 2009. By August, he signed with the Philadelphia Eagles and was finally back in the league under strict conditions. The 2012 Saints. From 2009 to 2011, several defensive players were part of a bounty program that rewarded them for injuring opponents. It was run by defensive coordinator Greg Williams, and players were paid for hits that knocked opponents out of games. On March 2nd, 2012, the NFL revealed that between 22 and 27 players took part. On May 2nd, the league handed out suspensions. Jonathan Vilma was suspended for the entire 2012 season. Anthony Hargrove got 8 games. Will Smith got 4, and Scott Fujita got 3. By September 7th, those suspensions were overturned. Then on October 9th, the league reinstated them. Finally, in December, Paul Tagliabue vacated all suspensions. Vilma returned and played 11 games that year. Hargrove never played another game. Will Smith got hurt in 2013. Fujita retired in 2013. Art Foltz. He was suspended for life after his role in one of the earliest scandals in NFL history. In 1925, Foltz played for the Chicago Cardinals. That year, the Pottsville Maroons were leading the league, and the Cardinals were desperate to catch them. On December 10th, Foltz recruited 4 high school players from his old school, Englewood High, to suit up for the Milwaukee Badgers. They played under fake names, making the game a guaranteed win for the Cardinals. Chicago crushed Milwaukee 59-0. After the game, NFL President Joseph Carr banned Foltz from professional football for life. The Milwaukee Badgers owner was forced to sell the team. The Cardinals owner got fined $1,000. In 1926, Foltz's ban was lifted, but he never returned. That game helped the Cardinals claim the 1925 title, though they refused to accept it at the time. Ray Rice. He was suspended indefinitely after a domestic violence case that changed the NFL's policies forever. On February 15, 2014, Rice and his fiancée, Janae Palmer, were arrested following a physical altercation in an Atlantic City casino. Surveillance footage showed Rice dragging Palmer, unconscious, from an elevator. A month later, Rice was indicted for third-degree aggravated assault. The very next day, he and Palmer got married. By May, Rice was accepted into a pretrial intervention program. That July, the NFL suspended him 2 games, sparking massive criticism. On September 8, TMZ released new video showing Rice punching Palmer inside the elevator. The Ravens released him immediately, and the NFL suspended him indefinitely. In November, Rice appealed and won, but no team ever signed him. Tom Brady. He was suspended 4 games after the Deflategate scandal shook up the NFL. On January 18, 2015, the Patriots crushed the Colts 45-7 in the AFC Championship. After the game, people started questioning whether the footballs were underinflated. 5 days later, the NFL launched an investigation. By May 6th, the Wells report came out and said it was more probable than not that Patriots staff deflated the balls and that Brady probably knew about it. On May 11th, the NFL suspended him 4 games without pay. The Patriots were fined $1 million and lost 2 draft picks. Brady appealed, but in July, Roger Goodell upheld the suspension, partly because Brady had destroyed his cell phone. In September, a judge overturned it, but in April 2016, it was reinstated. Brady accepted it in July and served his suspension that September. IK Enemkpali. He was suspended 4 games after punching quarterback Geno Smith in the jaw. On August 11th, 2015, inside the New York Jets locker room, Enemkpali and Smith got into an argument over $600. Enemkpali had bought Smith a plane ticket for a football camp, but Smith never showed. Things got heated, and Enemkpali threw a punch that broke Smith's jaw. The Jets released Enemkpali later that same day. Just 1 day after being cut, he was picked up by the Buffalo Bills, where Rex Ryan, his former coach, was in charge. On September 11th, the NFL suspended Enemkpali for 4 games without pay for violating the personal conduct policy. Smith needed surgery and missed about 6 to 10 weeks. After serving his suspension, Pauly returned to the Bills, but never locked down a steady role. He was released in 2016 after suffering a knee injury. Pac-Man Jones. He was suspended for the entire 2007 season after a violent incident in Las Vegas. On February 19, 2007, during NBA All-Star Weekend, Jones and his entourage were at Mink's Gentlemen's Club. Things got out of hand when Jones reportedly grabbed a dancer by the hair and slammed her head into the stage. A security guard stepped in and a fight broke out. Jones allegedly threatened the guard's life. Later, someone from Jones's group came back and fired shots into the crowd. 3 people were injured, including a security guard who was left paralyzed. In March, Las Vegas police recommended multiple charges against Jones. On April 10th, Roger Goodell suspended him for the entire season. In June, Jones was formally charged. By December, he took a plea deal, avoiding prison but getting probation. Frank Filchock and Merle Hapes both were suspended indefinitely after being caught up in one of the NFL's first bribery scandals. In December 1946, the New York Giants were set to play the Chicago Bears for the championship. The day before the game, gamblers tried to bribe Filchock and Hapes. They offered $2,500 each, profits from a $1,000 bet, and off-season jobs worth $15,000. Hapes admitted he was approached, but denied taking the bribe. Filchock denied everything. Hapes was suspended before the game, but Filchock was allowed to play. The Giants lost 24-14. Afterward, gambler Alvin Paris was arrested and confessed. By April 1947, Filchock admitted under oath he'd been offered money, and both players were suspended indefinitely. They later played in Canada before being reinstated. The scandal pushed the NFL to crack down hard on gambling. Big Ben. He was suspended 6 games in 2010 for violating the NFL's personal conduct policy. In March that year, a 20-year-old college student accused Big Ben of sexual assault at a nightclub in Milledgeville, Georgia. No criminal charges were filed, but the NFL still launched an investigation. By April, Roger Goodell handed Big Ben a 6-game suspension without pay. It was the first time a player was suspended under the policy without being arrested or charged. Ben had to complete a behavioral evaluation and follow any recommended counseling. If he met the conditions, the suspension could be cut to 4 games. Missing 6 games would have cost him about $2.8 million. In September, Goodell reduced the suspension to 4 games. After reviewing Ben's compliance, he returned that October. The Steelers supported the decision, and Goodell emphasized how seriously the league took its personal conduct policy. By the way, if you guys want to subscribe, I'm going to start posting every day. Thanks. Anyways, Alex Karras and Paul Hornung both were suspended for the entire 1963 season after betting on NFL games. In April that year, Commissioner Pete Rozelle handed down indefinite suspensions to Karras and Hornung. Investigators found out both players had placed bets, including wagers on their own teams. Karras, who played defensive tackle for the Detroit Lions, was hit hard by the league's strict anti-gambling policy. Along with those suspensions, 5 other Lions players were each fined $2,000 for betting on games they didn't even play in. Karras' suspension left a big hole in the Lions' defense, and they finished the season with 5 wins, 8 losses, and 1 tie. During his time away, Karras went back to professional wrestling. By March 1964, Rozelle reinstated both Karras and Hornung. Karras returned to dominate on defense and was later inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Plaxico Burress. He was suspended 4 games and lost 2 full seasons after accidentally shooting himself. In November 2008, Burress was at the Latin Quarter nightclub in New York City. He had an unlicensed Glock pistol tucked in his pants when it accidentally discharged, hitting him in the right thigh. He went to the hospital, got treated, and checked out the next day. A few days later, he turned himself in and was charged with criminal possession of a handgun. The New York Giants suspended him 4 games without pay and placed him on the reserve list, making him ineligible for the rest of the season. By April 2009, the Giants released him. In August, Burress took a plea deal, pled guilty, and got sentenced to 2 years in prison. He served about 20 months. In 2011, he returned to the NFL and signed with the Jets. Myles Garrett. He was suspended indefinitely after swinging a helmet at Mason Rudolph during a Thursday night football game in 2019. With just seconds left, Garrett tackled Rudolph after a pass. They got into a scuffle on the ground. Garrett ripped Rudolph's helmet off and then swung it, hitting Rudolph in the head. The fight turned into a full brawl. Garrett, Maurkice Pouncey, and Larry Ogunjobi were all ejected. The next day, Garrett was suspended for the rest of the season, including any playoff games. Pouncey got 3 games for punching and kicking Garrett. Ogunjobi was suspended 1 game for shoving Rudolph. Both teams were fined $250,000, and 33 players were fined for entering the fight zone. Garrett appealed, but the suspension stood. He was reinstated in February 2020. He later claimed Rudolph used a racial slur, but the NFL found no proof. Sue, he was suspended 2 games in 2011 after stomping on an opponent during a Thanksgiving Day game. In the third quarter against the Packers, Sue got into it with offensive lineman Evan Dietrich Smith. After the play ended, Sue shoved Dietrich Smith's head into the ground several times, then stomped on his arm. He was flagged for unnecessary roughness and immediately ejected. The Packers scored a touchdown 2 plays later and went on to win 27-15. Less than a week later, the NFL suspended Sue 2 games without pay. He lost over $165,000 in wages. Sue appealed the suspension, but it was upheld. He missed games against the Saints and Vikings. After initially denying the stomp was intentional, Sue apologized both publicly and privately. The incident added to his reputation for aggressive play, though he still finished the season as a Pro Bowl alternate. Art Schlichter. He was suspended indefinitely in 1983 for betting on NFL games and other sports. Schlichter's gambling problems started back in college at Ohio State and only got worse once he went pro with the Baltimore Colts. By the end of the 1982 season, he had racked up at least $700,000 in gambling debts. Things got so bad that bookies were threatening him, and he ended up cooperating with the FBI. His information helped them arrest several gamblers in the Baltimore area. In May 1983, Pete Rozelle suspended Schlichter indefinitely. The suspension was later reduced to 13 months after Schlichter agreed to get treatment for his gambling addiction. He was reinstated in June 1984, but his problems never really went away. Schlichter's career ended soon after, and his story became a warning about the dangers of gambling addiction. Gronk. He was suspended 1 game in 2017 after delivering a late and dangerous hit on Tre'Davious White. In the fourth quarter against the Bills, White intercepted a pass intended for Gronk. After the play was over, White was lying face down on the field when Gronk dove and drove his elbow into White's head and neck. The hit drew a personal foul, and White was later placed in the concussion protocol. The next day, the NFL suspended Gronk 1 game without pay for violating unnecessary roughness rules. They said his actions were avoidable and could have seriously injured White. Gronk appealed the suspension, but it was upheld, forcing him to miss the Patriots game against the Dolphins, which they lost 27-20. Afterward, Gronk apologized and called the hit out of character. White called it a dirty shot. The league used this moment to reinforce its focus on player safety. 23 Lions. In April 2023, the NFL suspended 3 Detroit Lions players for violating the league's gambling policy. Jamison Williams was suspended 6 games for betting on non-NFL sports from a team facility. Even though he didn't bet on NFL games, placing bets on team property broke the rules. His suspension was later reduced to 4 games after the NFL updated its policy, and he was reinstated in early October. Stanley Berryhill was suspended for the same violation. His 6-game ban was also cut to 4 games, and he was reinstated alongside Williams. C.J. Moore got an indefinite suspension for betting on NFL games, a direct violation of league rules. He's eligible to apply for reinstatement after the season. Following the news, the Lions released both Moore and Quintez Cephas. Brandon Jacobs, he was suspended for the final 3 games of the 2012 regular season by the San Francisco 49ers for conduct detrimental to the team. Jacobs had signed with the 49ers in March but barely saw the field. A knee injury kept him out early, and he ended up playing in only 2 games, rushing 5 times for 7 yards. Frustrated with his lack of playing time, Jacobs took to social media to vent. He posted photos of himself wearing New York Giants gear and said he was rotting away on the 49ers. On December 10th, the team suspended him for the rest of the season. They later waived him at the end of December. In 2013, Jacobs returned to the Giants, played 7 games, and scored 4 touchdowns before retiring in January 2014 after a successful career. Mike Riley. He was suspended for the entire 1983 season after a fatal car accident led to serious legal consequences. In August 1982, near the Los Angeles Rams training camp, Riley was involved in a crash that killed a 17-year-old boy and seriously injured 2 others. He was later convicted of felony drunken driving and vehicular manslaughter. Riley received a 1-year jail sentence and started serving time in Orange County, California. While he was still incarcerated, NFL Commissioner Pete Rozelle suspended him for the entire 1983 season and fined him $10,000. Riley was released from jail after serving 5 months, but the league did not reinstate him for the rest of that season. The incident and the suspension severely damaged his NFL career. Jeff George, he was suspended 4 weeks in 1996 after a heated sideline argument with Atlanta Falcons head coach June Jones. During a nationally televised game against the Eagles, George was benched in the third quarter. That led to a 10-minute shouting match between him and Jones, filled with abusive language. The next day, the Falcons suspended George for conduct detrimental to the team and barred him from all team activities. Backup quarterback Bobby Hebert took over as the starter. After the 4-week suspension ended, the Falcons waived George, making him available to the rest of the league. Atlanta finished the season with 3 wins and 13 losses and gave up more points than any team in franchise history at the time. June Jones was fired after the season. George signed with the Oakland Raiders in 1997 and later bounced between several teams, often clashing with coaches and management. Pat McAfee. He was suspended 1 game in 2010 after being arrested for public intoxication. In October, McAfee was found by police in Broad Ripple, a nightlife district in Indianapolis. He was shirtless, soaking wet, and had reportedly gone for an early morning swim in a city canal. His blood alcohol level was 0.15%, almost double Indiana's legal limit for driving. Later that day, the Colts suspended McAfee for conduct detrimental to the team. He missed their November game against the Texans, while Jeremy Kapinos stepped in as the temporary punter. About 2 weeks later, McAfee apologized publicly, saying he was embarrassed and promised never to put his team or family through that again. After the suspension, McAfee returned to the field and finished his career with no further off-field issues. Tank Johnson. He was suspended 8 games in 2007 after multiple firearm-related incidents and probation violations. In December 2006, police raided Johnson's home in Illinois and found 6 unregistered guns, including 2 assault rifles. At the time, Johnson was already on probation for a previous gun charge from 2005, making the new arrest a violation. Just 2 days after the raid, Johnson's bodyguard was shot and killed at a nightclub while Johnson was there. The Bears suspended him 1 game for being at the club. In March 2007, Johnson was sentenced to 120 days in jail for violating his probation and was released in May for good behavior. On June 4th, Roger Goodell suspended Johnson 8 games. Later that month, Johnson was pulled over in Arizona and the Bears released him. In September, Johnson signed with the Cowboys after serving his suspension. Ray Caruth. He was suspended indefinitely from the NFL in 1999 after being involved in one of the most notorious criminal cases in league history. Caruth was dating Cherika Adams, who was 8 months pregnant with his child. In November 1999, Adams was shot 4 times near Caruth's home by Van Brett Watkins, a man connected to Caruth. Before slipping into a coma, Adams called 911 and said Caruth had blocked her car, allowing Watkins to pull alongside and shoot. Adams died a month later. Doctors delivered her son, Chancellor Lee Adams, by emergency cesarean, but he suffered permanent brain damage. Caruth fled after being arrested, but police found him hiding in a car trunk. The Panthers released him, and the NFL suspended him indefinitely. In 2001, Caruth was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder and sentenced to nearly 24 years in prison. Ezekiel Elliott. He was suspended 6 games in 2017 for violating the NFL's personal conduct policy following domestic violence allegations. In July 2016, Elliott's ex-girlfriend accused him of multiple incidents of domestic violence in Columbus, Ohio. While he wasn't criminally charged, the NFL ran a year-long investigation and concluded he had violated league policy. In August 2017, the NFL announced a 6-game suspension, the standard penalty for a first-time domestic violence case. Elliott appealed, and in September, he was granted a temporary restraining order allowing him to play. That ruling was overturned in October, reinstating the suspension. He briefly delayed it again with another restraining order, but eventually dropped the appeals and began serving the 6 games in mid-November. During his absence, the Cowboys lost 3 straight and missed the playoffs. Elliott returned in Week 16 and finished the season with 983 rushing yards. Terrell Pryor. He was suspended 5 games in 2011 when he entered the NFL, stemming from violations during his college career at Ohio State. While at Ohio State, Pryor and several teammates received improper benefits, including selling team memorabilia and getting discounted tattoos, breaking NCAA rules. The NCAA handed Pryor a 5-game suspension for the 2011 college season, but before serving it, Pryor left school in June 2011 as investigations continued, and head coach Jim Tressel resigned. Pryor entered the NFL supplemental draft in August, where the Oakland Raiders picked him in the 3rd round. Before the draft, Roger Goodell suspended Pryor 5 games, saying he had manipulated his eligibility to enter the league. Pryor appealed, but the NFL upheld the suspension in late September. After serving his ban, Pryor made his debut and eventually transitioned to wide receiver during his NFL career. Martellus Bennett. He was suspended indefinitely in August 2014 for conduct detrimental to the Chicago Bears after an altercation with rookie cornerback Kyle Fuller during training camp. The fight happened during practice at Olivet Nazarene University. Bennett caught a pass near the goal line, and Fuller tried to strip the ball by grabbing his shoulder pads. Both players fell to the ground, but Bennett got up quickly and slammed Fuller back down. Several teammates and coaches had to step in, and head coach Mark Trestman ended practice early. The next day, Bears general manager Phil Emery announced Bennett's suspension and a fine, though the team didn't say how long it would last. Bennett wasn't allowed at team facilities or team activities. Afterward, Bennett said, "It's practice. Stuff happens." He returned 5 days later on August 10th. Don Jones. He was suspended indefinitely in May 2014 after making inappropriate comments on social media about Michael Sam. On May 10th, Sam became the first openly gay player drafted into the NFL when the Rams selected him in the 7th round. During ESPN's coverage, Sam kissed his boyfriend in celebration. Soon after, Jones tweeted "OMG" and later replied "horrible" when asked about the moment. The Miami Dolphins responded quickly, fining Jones an undisclosed amount and suspending him from all team activity. They also required him to complete educational training before returning. Head coach Joe Philbin called the comments inappropriate and said they didn't represent the team's values. Jones later issued a public apology to Sam, the Dolphins, and their fans, saying he regretted his remarks. After finishing his training, Jones was reinstated on May 19th. He went on to play for multiple teams before finishing his NFL career in 2018. Terry Glenn. He was suspended multiple times in 2001, which eventually ended his time with the New England Patriots. In August, the NFL suspended Glenn for 4 games after violating the league's substance abuse policy. Soon after, he failed to report to training camp, and the Patriots suspended him indefinitely for conduct detrimental to the team. Bill Belichick made it clear that team rules mattered, and every player needed to be part of the preparation. Glenn was reinstated after serving the league suspension, but things didn't improve. He dealt with injuries and clashed with the coaching staff. By late November, the Patriots suspended him again for refusing to practice. Glenn only played in 4 games that season, catching 14 passes for 204 yards and 1 touchdown. He was deactivated for the rest of the season, including their Super Bowl run. Glenn wasn't awarded a ring after their championship win. Adrian Peterson. He was suspended for the remainder of the 2014 season after facing child abuse charges involving his 4-year-old son. In May, Peterson disciplined his son with a wooden switch, leaving slash-like wounds on his legs, back, buttocks, genitals, and ankles. In September, a grand jury in Texas indicted him on charges of reckless or negligent injury to a child. The Vikings deactivated him for 1 game before placing him on the NFL's exempt list, keeping him away from all team activities. On November 18th, Roger Goodell suspended Peterson without pay for violating the league's personal conduct policy, making him ineligible for reinstatement before April 15, 2015. The NFL Players Association appealed the suspension, but an arbitrator upheld it. In February, a federal judge ruled in Peterson's favor, saying the arbitrator overstepped his authority. Peterson was reinstated in April after missing 15 games in 2014. Marshawn Lynch. He was suspended 1 game in 2017 after making physical contact with an official during a game between the Raiders and Chiefs. In the second quarter, Chiefs cornerback Marcus Peters hit Derek Carr late, sparking a scuffle on the field. Lynch wasn't in the game at the time, but ran from the sidelines straight into the middle of it. During the chaos, he shoved line judge Julian Mapp and grabbed his jersey while trying to get involved. Lynch was ejected from the game for unsportsmanlike conduct and making contact with an official. The next day, the NFL suspended him for 1 game without pay. He appealed the suspension, but it was upheld. Lynch forfeited his game check, worth nearly $80,000. Despite losing him that night, the Raiders beat the Chiefs 31-30. Lynch returned after serving his suspension in Week 8 against the Bills. Brandon Marshall. He was suspended 1 game in 2008 for violating the NFL's personal conduct policy after multiple off-field incidents. Earlier that year, in March, Marshall was arrested in Atlanta on a domestic violence charge involving his former girlfriend. He also had a pending court date for a DUI charge set for September. On August 5th, Roger Goodell handed down a 3-game suspension, but after Marshall appealed, the league reduced it to 1 game. Along with the suspension, Marshall was fined the equivalent of 2 additional game checks, totaling just over $52,000. He served his suspension during the Broncos' season opener against the Raiders. When he returned in Week 2 against the Chargers, he set a franchise record with 18 receptions for 166 yards and a touchdown. Dante Stallworth. He was suspended for the entire 2009 season after a fatal DUI incident in Miami Beach. On March 14th, Stallworth struck and killed 59-year-old Mario Reyes while driving his Bentley. Reyes was trying to catch a bus after finishing a construction shift. Stallworth's blood alcohol level was 0.12, well over Florida's legal limit. He was charged with DUI manslaughter and pleaded guilty. Stallworth was sentenced to 30 days in jail, 2 years of house arrest, 8 years of probation, and 1,000 hours of community service. His driver's license was permanently revoked. He also reached a financial settlement with Reyes' family to avoid a civil lawsuit. On August 13th, Roger Goodell suspended Stallworth for the entire season without pay. After Super Bowl 44, he was reinstated. Stallworth later signed with the Ravens and continued playing in the NFL for a few more seasons. Chris Cook. He was suspended indefinitely in 2011 by the Minnesota Vikings after being arrested on domestic assault charges. On October 22nd, police arrested Cook at his home in Eden Prairie, Minnesota. His girlfriend accused him of strangling her during an argument, causing marks on her neck and a perforated eardrum. Cook was charged with felony domestic assault by strangulation and third-degree assault. Following the arrest, the Vikings suspended him without pay, citing the serious nature of the allegations. Cook missed 10 games during the 2011 season while dealing with the legal process. In March 2012, a jury found him not guilty, determining he acted in self-defense. After his acquittal, the Vikings reinstated him for the 2012 season. Antonio Smith. He was suspended 3 games in 2013 after an on-field altercation with Dolphins guard Richie Incognito during a preseason matchup. On August 17th, tensions escalated when Smith forcibly removed Incognito's helmet and swung it at him, narrowly missing contact. The incident was serious enough that the NFL acted quickly. On August 20th, Smith was suspended for the remainder of the preseason and the Texans' regular season opener. It wasn't the first time these two had issues. Smith had previously been fined for kicking Incognito the year before, claiming Incognito twisted his ankle after the whistle. Smith's suspension caused him to miss Houston's regular season opener against the Chargers and cost him game checks. He planned to appeal the suspension, but the outcome wasn't widely reported. Josh Brent. He was suspended 10 games in 2014 after a fatal car accident in December 2012 that killed his teammate, Jerry Brown. On December 8th, Brent was driving his Mercedes in Irving, Texas, when he struck a curb at high speed and overturned the vehicle. His blood alcohol level was 0.189, over twice the legal limit in Texas. Brent was charged with intoxication manslaughter and later convicted in January 2014. He was sentenced to 180 days in jail and 10 years of probation. On September 2nd, the NFL suspended Brent for 10 games for violating the league's personal conduct policy. After serving his suspension, Brent was reinstated and returned to the Cowboys, playing in limited action before retiring in May 2015. Brent later transitioned into a scouting role with the Cowboys following his playing career. Derek Shelby. He was suspended indefinitely in October 2014 by the Miami Dolphins after an arrest at a Fort Lauderdale nightclub. On October 4th, Shelby was accused of inappropriately touching women and appeared intoxicated. When police asked him to leave, he refused and took an aggressive stance. Officers used a taser on him 3 times before taking him into custody. Shelby was charged with misdemeanor trespassing and resisting arrest without violence. 2 days later, the Dolphins suspended him for conduct detrimental to the team. Head coach Joe Philbin emphasized holding all players to high standards. Shelby pleaded not guilty to the charges. After serving a 1-week suspension, he was reinstated on October 13th. He returned to action and contributed to the defense, recording his first career interception in December against the Vikings. Prince Shembo. He was suspended for 2 games in 2016 after being involved in an animal cruelty incident. In May 2015, Shembo was arrested for allegedly killing his ex-girlfriend's Yorkshire Terrier. The dog died from blunt force trauma after being left in Shembo's care. Initially charged with felony aggravated cruelty to animals, Shembo eventually pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor charge. He was sentenced to 12 months of probation and fined $1,000. The Atlanta Falcons waived Shembo after the arrest. In August 2016, the NFL suspended him for 2 games under the personal conduct policy. In September of the same year, Shembo's agent reached out to 12 NFL teams, seeking a chance for a second opportunity. Michael Kendricks. He faced significant legal and professional consequences in 2018 after pleading guilty to charges related to insider trading. In August of that year, Kendricks was charged after allegedly receiving confidential information from Damilare Sonoiki, a Goldman Sachs analyst, and using it to make approximately $1,200,000 by investing in stocks of companies about to be acquired. In exchange, Kendricks reportedly provided Sonoiki with $10,000 and Eagles game tickets. Kendricks pleaded guilty to securities fraud and conspiracy charges on September 6, 2018. The NFL suspended him indefinitely on October 2, 2018 for violating the personal conduct policy. Later, the suspension was reduced to 8 games, allowing him to return in Week 14. In July 2021, Kendricks was sentenced to 1 day in jail, 3 years of probation, and 300 hours of community service. He returned to play for the Seahawks after serving his suspension. Winston. He faced a 3-game suspension in June 2018 for violating the NFL's personal conduct policy following an investigation into an incident with a female Uber driver. The investigation concluded that Winston had touched the Uber driver inappropriately and sexually without her consent during a ride in March 2016. The NFL determined that his actions violated the personal conduct policy, leading to the suspension. On June 28, 2018, the NFL officially announced Winston's suspension for the first 3 games of the regular season. The league also made it clear that failure to comply with mandated evaluation or treatment could result in further discipline. Additionally, any future violations could lead to more severe penalties, including potential banishment from the NFL. Winston publicly apologized for his actions and acknowledged the incident, stating that he had learned from the experience and would work to be a better person. Odell Beckham Jr. He was suspended for 1 game in December 2015 after a series of altercations with Panthers cornerback Josh Norman during a regular season game. On December 20th, Beckham engaged in multiple physical incidents, including a helmet-to-helmet collision with Norman in the 3rd quarter. Beckham was penalized 4 times throughout the game, including 3 personal fouls for actions like throwing punches and taunting. The NFL deemed his helmet-to-helmet hit especially dangerous and avoidable. On December 21st, the league handed down a 1-game suspension for violating safety-related playing rules. Beckham appealed the suspension, but after a hearing, the decision was upheld. His suspension caused him to miss the Giants' Week 16 game against the Minnesota Vikings, a critical matchup for their playoff hopes. The Giants lost that game, further damaging their playoff chances. Richie Incognito. In November 2013, he was suspended indefinitely by the Miami Dolphins for conduct detrimental to the team, following allegations of bullying and harassment toward teammate Jonathan Martin. The allegations surfaced after Martin left the team's facilities in late October, citing emotional distress. Martin provided evidence, including threatening voicemails and text messages, with one voicemail containing racial slurs and threats against Martin and his family. The Dolphins suspended Incognito on November 3, 2013, and the NFL launched an investigation led by attorney Ted Well. The investigation concluded that Incognito, along with teammates John Jerry and Mike Pouncey, engaged in a pattern of harassment. On February 4, 2014, the Dolphins lifted Incognito's suspension, allowing him to return. However, the incident affected team dynamics and Incognito's public image. In February 2025, Martin publicly stated he didn't feel bullied, and Incognito criticized the media for damaging his reputation. If you enjoyed this, I'm going to be posting a lot here. I would greatly appreciate it if you could subscribe. Thanks for watching.